Hi, Gary. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the time you've taken to speak with us today.
It's great to speak to you. It's great to see you again after the World Islamic Tourism Conference a few weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you so much. Of course, you are a very popular figure and important industry leader and speaker in the tourism industry for such a long period of time. It's really commendable. But for those people who don't know much about you, could it be possible for you, please, to give a brief rundown of who you are as a professional and how you got started in the travel industry in the first place?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for your kind words. It actually goes right back to the early days, Hafiz, when my mother was a travel agent. So I grew up with travel all around me. I grew up working in the back office of my mum's travel agent as a young kid. And that really sort of instilled the travel bug in me. I've worked as a travel journalist. I've worked as a travel editor, travel economist. But right now I have my own company. I have two companies. I'm based in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And we have a company called High Yield Tourism, which advises destinations around the world about the changing travel economics, particularly in Asia Pacific, but worldwide, and helping destinations to really think about segmentation and diversification in their tourism industries. I'm the co-host of the Southeast Asia Travel Show, which is a podcast we run weekly here in Southeast Asia. And I'm also a travel analyst for Focusrite based in Asia Pacific. So do a lot of different things. I've also written a couple of books about the Chinese travel industry. I lived in China for 7 years in Shanghai and Beijing. So yeah, I travel a lot around the region, and thankfully, 3 years after the pandemic, things are starting to happen again. The energy is back, the commercial energy is back, and we're starting to talk about key issues of the future, not really looking backwards, which we've been doing a little bit too much in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And what do you think are the key trends shaping the tourism landscape, specifically in this part of the world where you've been living for such a long period of time, for almost 17 or 20 years, maybe?
Many factors. I mean, we're looking at the major markets. So there are three 1 billion plus markets that we talk about. One is the Chinese market, one is the Indian market, and one, of course, is the Muslim market. These are the three big real drivers of change in global travel and tourism, but particularly here in Asia Pacific. We have a lot of demographic change in the region. We have a lot of investment. We have a lot of growth in terms of middle classes. We have a lot of investment in the travel industry, which stopped during the pandemic, but it started to come back again. So the one thing I would say about Asia Pacific is it's a generator of change and innovation in travel and tourism globally. But it's also a real strong generator of change within the Asia Pacific region. A lot of the changes that we're seeing within this region really are changing the way people think about travel, the way they think about travel within Asia Pacific and how they travel globally. So there are a lot of factors in both leisure and business travel which are going to change over the next 10 years. And I guess the other issue, the underlying issue, which the travel industry really hasn't got to grips with yet, is how we deal with sustainability and climate change. These are going to be overarching factors on everything.
That's absolutely true. And as we were discussing, that sustainability has become a very important, very significant topic globally for the past several years now. What do you think Asia? How do you think Asia is adapting to this demand in its tourism strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we were both at the World Islamic Tourism Conference in Kuala Lumpur 6 or 7 weeks ago. And I've been to a lot of conferences recently. And what we're definitely seeing is that the travel industry is grappling with these challenges in a different way than it did perhaps even 2 years ago. The debates have moved on. We're looking much more at issues around technology and people change, demographic change, particularly how younger people are thinking about sustainability. I think there's a big generational change. And the travel industry, politics, most industries are led by older people, but it's young people that are really probably the more innovative and the more caring in terms of the way they think about the environment. So I think we're on a progression. Nobody really is expecting that travel and tourism is going to change the world. It's not going to solve a lot of the problems that we have, but we can contribute to making a better world. And we're at that part of the discussion, I think, at the moment. Everybody wants to have a contribution in making change, but I still think we're not quite really sure how to make that effective.
Hopefully, things will get better soon. Maybe in a few years' time, we will see much better discussions, and hopefully, we will have made some progress in this regard.
I agree. And I think the fact that the discussions are changing, the direction of the discussions is really changing to the emergency. I mean, the fact is we can't say that this is happening in future. It's happening right now. Climate change is a part of everybody's lives. And it will impact travel and tourism. You know, it will impact the seasonality. It's already impacting the seasonality in some areas where, you know, there used to be snow in winter and there's less snow for skiing, that kind of thing. The oceans are changing. So there are a lot of factors that are happening right now, and that will affect seasonality patterns for sure.
Gary, as you know, that the Halal Times main focus is halal tourism. So, what do you see the growth patterns of halal tourism in different parts of Asia, specifically Southeast Asia, and what opportunities do you believe that exist for destinations to better cater to Muslim travelers?
Yeah, it's a good question because, you know, two of the destinations in this region, Malaysia, Indonesia, probably lead Asia Pacific in terms of, well, their Muslim populations, but how they actually think about and the regulatory standards and the the products and services they have in place for Muslim travelers. But those are evolving. You know, what's being done. I think one of the interesting things that we found out at the WITC is really how Malaysia is trying to evolve its approach and think about that Muslim tourists now are different than they were 2 or 3 years ago. They have different aspirations, different expectations, want to travel to different parts of the country, want to be more immersed in culture and heritage. I think that's a really, really important driver. Islamic culture and heritage we saw in destinations like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. They have very, very strong ways of promoting what they're doing. And it's really interesting to see that that is generating a lot of interest. Now, of course, as you generate interest in countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, you take interest away from other countries. So there's going to be a much more competitive element in terms of how destinations think about their competitive sets, how they evolve the way they're attracting Muslim tourists from different demographics. You know, we're seeing huge, I would say, huge epochal change really in this industry. Everybody knows that they have to be more improvisational, more innovative, but they're going through that process of actually effecting that now.
Right. And as you know, that for the past couple of years specifically, AI has become a big buzzword everywhere, almost in every discussion. We cannot avoid this word. So it has been changing a lot of industries. What do you think could be the impact of AI and digital transformation as far as the halal tourism or tourism industry is concerned?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's another one of those that we haven't really got to grips with where this is going in future. It's happening so fast right in front of our eyes. I think there's two aspects to it. I think there's the one side, which is the operational side, which is helping businesses that attract Muslim tourists to be more effective in the way they just manage their business, their operations, their marketing. But the other side, really the front-facing side, is the solutions and the experiences that are going to be AI driven, and how that's going to help people experience culture and heritage and food and nature in new and exciting ways. And we're starting to see some of these innovations come through, but there's just so many of them. I think, you know, we haven't yet found the one that's really game changing, but we will do. You know, we're along the road of doing that. And I think younger Muslim tourists are going to be very receptive to this. They're going to be really appreciative of how technology enhances the travel experience. Asia, especially, I think, you know, it's a very, very tech savvy region. A lot of people have grown up with change, constant change in technology. It's not new to them. You know, it's almost a transition to the next level of technology in tourism. So exciting times in that sphere, Hafiz, but I'm not quite sure where it's going. I don't think anybody does yet. But we will see. Even conferences, you're starting to see now conference presentations look different than they did a year ago. You know, you're using more tools to make your destination or what you're talking about in travel and tourism just seem more visual. And we are in an age of people very, very attuned to visuality, social media, imagery, videos, that kind of thing. So it's going to change absolutely everything. It already is, but I don't think we've even scraped the surface yet.
Right. And how has, from your point of view, how has consumer behavior in travel shifted in recent years, and what should businesses be doing to respond effectively? Of course, we need to be talking about the Gen Z, and they are very sizable uh, population, almost in every single Asian country specifically. So, what is your take on this issue? As far
Yeah, I agree. Well, I totally agree. I think certainly the side of the social angle of travel has changed completely, particularly amongst younger people, how they consume travel, how they think about travel, how they watch and view travel. Obviously, they have shorter attention spans, and you know the TikTok era has changed quite a lot about the way we market destinations. That's changed completely, really, in the last 2 years. I think the really important side in this region is the payment side, because young people are very, very used to having instant payments, using their phones, touchless, seamless. You're not involved in currency whatsoever, and that's okay in most countries because we have so many different payment formats. But a lot of them don't transfer across borders at the moment. Not yet. I think we're moving into that era. I think once that happens, that gives consumers much more confidence to spend because they know they're spending in their own currency rather than being uncertain about a foreign currency, and it'll make them more spontaneous. So I think we're moving in that era of having not just cashless countries, but cashless regions, and that will really have an impact on young people and the way they spend.
Right. As you mentioned in the beginning, just a while ago, that China's outbound tourism, of China is a very, very, very large country, more than 1.4 billion people. And as far as China's outbound tourism market is concerned, to my understanding, it's evolving, constantly evolving. And what impact do you think could it have on the global tourism trends?
It's a good question. It's a really interesting time to be asking and answering that because it's 21 months now since China reopened. China was the last country to reopen to international tourism after the pandemic, 3 years of being closed. And we saw a lot of change in terms of travel patterns and trends and behaviors in China during those 3 years. So domestic travel really, really changed. And we're starting to see some of those influences from that era coming back into travel globally. So 2023 was a pretty slow year for the recovery from China, but 2024 has been much more expansive. We're not back to the numbers quite yet that we saw in 2019, but we are seeing stronger volumes. But as you said, we're seeing changing patterns of behavior. At the moment, we're still seeing a little bit more value consciousness, price consciousness, particularly in the larger markets. But I think that will change over time. But we're seeing the young Chinese people want to travel to different destinations. They're not just happy with going back to the same places that they've been to before. Some of the same trends that we're seeing in the Islamic market, nature, heritage, culture, food, cuisine, stuff that just excites the lifestyle in you, not just travel and tourism. People want to go and experience cultures and cuisines and all those things that make traveling to a different place exciting. And I think we've seen that in the Golden Week last week. We saw, if you look at some of the social media trends in China, people were going to Indonesia or to Malaysia or to Singapore, but once they got there, they were actually doing different experiences than they did before. And social media is enabling them to do this. So constant change, constant evolution. And as you said, with all of these major markets now, it's the younger people, the younger generations that are prompting change. And the travel industry will have to respond to that because the travel industry sometimes is a little bit slow to respond to new trends, but certainly younger people are the way forward in these major markets.
Right. Another very important phenomena, especially in Europe, if not in Asia, we've been hearing a lot in this industry is over tourism. Do you see any over tourism trends here in Asia, in different countries as well, or maybe it's not yet, we have not yet at the stage where we have to stop people from coming?
It's a good question. And I think Asia has had a slightly different experience with the return of travel from the pandemic simply because it was more phased. So we didn't have that mass rush that perhaps you had in Europe and in the US, Australia as well. But over tourism is an interesting phrase as well, because it's not the same in all destinations. You'll have different experiences of high concentrations of tourists in certain places. So we have seen some instances in Bali, for example, the traffic has got really bad. In Phuket, you're seeing a lot of pressure on water resources because of so many tourists coming back. Japan, we've seen some destinations just been overcrowded. That's where you live. There's been a lot of media attention about certain places where social media videos and photographs are just ruining the experience for local people. So we are having some of that. And, the high volumes of tourism now mean that this is an issue in some parts of Asia for sure. It's how we go forward. The difference, I would say, is the governmental approach in Asia is that most governments want to increase the numbers of tourists because it's such an important part of the the national economy. Whereas in Europe, it plays a lesser important role. But yeah, these issues are happening and they're coming. But I just think it's a slightly different approach. I mean, by contrast, if you look at China, I mean, China's always had over tourism. You look at some of the cities or some of the destinations like the Great Wall or the Hangzhou Westlake during Golden Week, and you've got millions of people in one space. But it only happens at certain periods of the year, and then it dissipates for a while. It's just about how it's managed, and it's a very cultural approach to it, which is slightly different to Europe, I would say.
And of course, we've been observing that the tourism industry has been growing pretty fast of course, with the only exception of we had a brief, interval where, of course, the tourism numbers declined during the pandemic. But before that, even before that, the tourism industry was growing pretty fast. So now we have almost overcome the pandemic issue, and now we have almost we crossed that line. But there might be some other huge challenges which the tourism industry is facing. So what are those challenges, and how could the industry overcome those challenges to basically help the industry grow much faster than it is now?
Yeah, that's also a really good question because, as you say, we are getting back to that point where we're moving into an era of regrowth, not just recovery. And that brings a lot of challenges. I would say a lot of the challenges we've seen over the past 3 years since Asia Pacific reopened, one of the biggest ones is human resources and manpower. A lot of people during the pandemic decided to move out of tourism because during the pandemic, they lost their jobs and they found they had to go and do something else, and they haven't come back. And I think that's one of the issues that the tourism industry is struggling with is, what are the levels of pay? What are the terms and conditions for people in jobs that are sometimes short contract workers or even non-contract workers? The industry has to get to grips with how it manages its resources, because that's the only way it's going to grow in future. We do have in some countries older populations. Japan is a good example. In some countries, we have younger populations. So managing resources going forward is going to be very, very difficult, particularly in countries where it's really aging, like Singapore, South Korea, Japan. How do you have the resources to cater to the huge volumes of tourists that can come into your country? That's going to be a different issue. That, of course, relates into costs. Look at airlines, look at hotels. Electricity costs have gone up, jet fuel costs are quite high. So the actual costs of travel are higher than they were before, which means the prices are going to be higher. I think these are issues that we can't get around. And of course, peace and security around the world. We live in a very, very uncertain period at the moment, and we don't really know going forward what are going to be the issues in terms of the global economy, in terms of global safety, and how some of these issues might actually radiate into other regions. So those are issues. And of course, the biggest challenge is sustainability and climate issue. And the fact that this storm season in Asia Pacific has been extremely strong. And I think it's started to scare a lot of people that this is the future already. How do we manage that?
And Gary, one thing at the end, of course, I don't want to take so much of your time. For example, as you know, the tourism industry, despite all these challenges which you just mentioned, the tourism industry is growing. And what advice would you like to give to young professionals who want to enter this industry these days?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think it's if you go back 10 years, it was quite easy to encourage young people to join the tourism industry. It was growing. It was a way to travel with work. A lot of young people, particularly those that went into the hotel industry, for example, they could do their internship, their apprenticeships in hotels, and then they could get posted around the world. And the hotel industry and the airline industry have always been, famous for that. People can go and have their careers wherever they go. And then that stopped. And, now companies are a lot more strict on how they manage their policies around human resources. But I would say, this is it already is a fast growing and a fast changing industry. And the interesting thing about travel and tourism is it now embraces all aspects of lifestyle. You know, it's not just about hotels and airlines and cruise ships and car rentals anymore. It brings in so many issues of music festivals, fashion, culture, history, banking and finance, payments. So many different elements are brought into tourism, and they overlap much more now than they used to do. Social media, of course, technology. So a career in tourism isn't like it used to be. You know, you can do a lot of different things and be part of the global travel and tourism sphere. And I think that's where the interest will be. You know, one of the topics that gets talked about a lot is digital nomads and how they're actually working in different places, living their lives while working wherever it is they go. And, you know, that is kind of the epitome of what the travel industry personifies, really. It's that ability to go and connect and to live and to enjoy different cultures, different spaces, enjoy your lifestyle in a local way. That's what everybody dreams of. And that's where the travel industry has to try and promote itself, I think, to younger people, that it's actually part of their lifestyle. It's not just about the career path.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully, our viewers will be able to learn a great deal from the discussion which we had today. Thank you very much. And I hope to be able to speak with you and meet with you again very soon sometime.
Yeah, I hope we catch up soon. It was great chatting to you. Thanks for the
Thank you
opportunity.
so much.